When I woke up it was dark. My hands and feet were tied together with rope and I was in great pain. I was very confused. I knew that I was somewhere inside the ship. It was going up and down with the movement of the waves. I felt seasick. I fell asleep again, but not long afterwards a small man woke me and held a light up to my face. I was very ill. My head hurt. I did not want to eat and I had a fever. The small man came back with the captain. "You must do something," I heard the man say. "He'll die if you leave him in here." Then the man, Mr. Riek, cut the ropes and carried me upstairs. He put me at the front of the ship with the rest of the crew. Then everything went black again. I stayed here for many days and slowly got better. Ransom told me that the ship was going to America. At this time, white men were still sold as slaves in America. I was certain that this was my uncle's plan for me. He paid Captain Hoseason to sell me as a slave in America. Ransom then told me about the other men. Mr. Riek was a good man except when he was sober. Mr. Schwan, the man that really knew how to sail the ship, was only dangerous when he was drunk. He often hit Ransom when he was drunk. One night, when Mr. Schwan was drunk, he killed Ransom. Captain Hoseason told me I had to do Ransom's job. I now had to stay in a different part of the ship, with Mr. Schwan. In this part of the ship they kept all the food, drink and weapons. Later on, we all sat at a table. There was a bottle of brandy in front of Mr. Schwan. He put out his hand to take the bottle but Mr. Riek stopped him. "You've already killed a boy because you were drunk," he cried. "Now stop," and he threw the bottle of brandy into the sea. Mr. Schwan jumped up. He looked like he was going to kill for the second time that night, but Captain Hoseason stopped him. "Enough," he said. "Do you know what you've done?" He asked Schwan. "You've murdered Ransom." Mr. Schwan seemed to understand. He sat down, covering his face with his hands. "Well, he gave me food on a dirty plate," he said quietly. The captain led Schwan to his bed. "Go to sleep," he said. Mr. Schwan lay down on the bed and started to cry. Now I was Mr. Schwan's servant, but was happy to work because it stopped me from thinking too much about my situation. A week went by. The weather was not good for sailing and we were not getting very far. I thought we were halfway across the Atlantic, but this was not true. We were still sailing south around the west coast of Scotland. One night it was very foggy. At about 10 o'clock, I was serving dinner to Mr. Riek and the captain. We heard a loud noise as the ship hit something. The two men jumped up and went to look. "We've hit a boat in the fog," someone said. The other boats sank to the bottom of the sea with all the crew except one man. This man was brought onto the Covenant. He was a small man. He wore good quality clothes and he had 2 guns and a sword. He and the captain looked at each other. The man told us that his name was Alan Breck Stewart. He was from Scotland, a Jacobite. He fought against the English a few years before. The English won, but their soldiers, the Redcoats, were still looking for Jacobite fighters. Alan Breck was trying to get to France and escape them. He asked Captain Hoseason to take him there. "France?" said the captain. "No, I can't do that. But I can take you back to Scotland. For some money, of course." The captain sent me away to get some food for Alan Breck. When I came back, he was counting out some money on the table. The captain looked excited. "Give me half of those coins and I'll take you to Scotland," he said. Alan Breck put his money away. "I can't," he said. "The money is not mine. It's for my chief. I can't give much of it away, but I'll give you 60 coins if you take me back to Scotland. Take it or leave it. Or I could give you to the redcoats," said the captain. "That isn't a good idea. Those soldiers want this money, too. They have to give it to King George. If you give me to the redcoats, they won't let you keep any of this money." "Well, 60 coins it is. Let's shake hands." The captain left. I cut some meat for Alan Breck and put it in front of him. "So, you're a Jacobite?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "And you? I imagine you support King George." "Not one or the other," I said, because I did not want to make him angry. "There's no more brandy," he said. "I want a drink for my 60 coins." I went to get the key to the brandy cupboard from the captain. It was still foggy outside. I saw the captain talking to Mr. Riek and I heard what they were saying. They were planning to kill Alan Breck so that they could take the rest of his money. When I heard this, I felt scared and angry. I did not want to be on a ship with such dishonest, violent men. My first thought was to run away, but I decided not to. I stepped forward. "Captain," I said, "the man wants some brandy and the bottle is empty. Can I have the key to get some more?" The men were surprised to hear my voice and turned around quickly. "That's the answer," said Hoseason to Mr. Riek. "David can get the guns. He knows where they are." Then he turned to me and said, "Listen, David. That man is a danger to the ship and we must do something about it. The problem is this, David. All our weapons are locked in the room he is in now. If I go in and take the guns, he'll know something is wrong. But if you go in and take a gun or two, he won't notice. If you do this, you can have some of the money too. I'll remember this when we arrive in America." I agreed to help them, but really I did not know what to do. They were thieves and murderers and I did not trust them. But then what chance did one man, Alan Breck, and one boy, me, have against a whole crew? I walked back into the room where Alan was eating and I made a decision. "Do you want to be killed?" I asked him. He jumped up quickly. "They've murdered a boy already and now they want to kill you," I said. "Will you help me?" he asked. "I will," I said. Now we looked around to see how to defend ourselves. There were 2 doors into the room and 1 small window. We closed one of the doors and left the other one open. He took out his sword and gave me all the guns. "Now listen to me," he said. "How many men are there?" 15, I said. "Well, there's nothing we can do about that. I'll watch this door, where the main fight will be. You must use the guns and watch the other door." I told him I was not a very good shot. "If they try to open the door you must shoot," he said. "Now, what else do you have to watch?" "The window, sir," I said. "But how can I watch both at the same time? When I'm looking at one of them, my back is towards the other." "That's true," said Alan. "But don't you have any ears?" "Of course," I said. "I must listen for the sound of breaking glass." "Exactly," said Alan. Meanwhile, the captain was still waiting for me to return with the guns. Finally he came to the door. Alan stopped him with his sword. "What's this?" said Hoseason. "I save your life and you show me a sword." "I know what you're planning," said Alan. "Now get your men together." I want to start this fight as soon as possible. The captain looked at me. I'll remember this, David, he said. We waited and listened. We heard voices and the metal sound of swords. Then silence. I wanted the fight to begin. The waiting was making me nervous. Then suddenly it started. There was the sound of feet and people shouting. I heard Alan shout and someone cry out because he was hurt. I looked over and saw Alan killing Mr. Schwan with his sword. "Watch your window," he shouted. I looked and saw 5 men running towards the other door. They were trying to break it down. I shot at them with my gun and hit one of them. The others looked confused. I shot at them again over their heads and then a third time. The men ran away. Somebody pulled Mr. Schwan's body out of the room. Then Alan and I were left alone. "It's not over yet," he said. "They'll be back." I reloaded my 3 guns. Then we listened and waited again. We heard a sound, and a group of men ran at the door. At the same time, the glass of the window broke and a man came through it. I pushed the gun in his back, but I was too scared to shoot. He turned around and put his hands around my neck. My courage came back. I shot him. A second man was coming in through the window. I shot him in the leg and he fell on top of the other man. I stood looking at them, but then I heard Alan shout for help. I turned and saw him fighting with a man. Many more men were coming in through the door with their swords in the air. "We're dead," I thought. But Alan ran at them all with his sword. With every step, a man fell. Suddenly they were all gone and Alan was running after them. He came back, but the men continued running away. In the room there were 3 dead men on the floor and another man lay dying near the door. Alan and I stood together. "We've won," he said calmly. I sat down. It was hard to breathe. I thought about the 2 men I killed. Suddenly, I started to cry like a child. "You're tired, David. I'll watch and you can sleep," he said. "You've done well." I slept for 3 hours. Then it was Alan's turn to sleep. I knew that there was nobody sailing the ship. It was moving gently with the wind. I heard the sound of the birds and I knew we must be near land. I looked out of the window and saw the hills of the Isle of Skye on the right, and behind us, the Isle of Rum.